What to do when the power goes out. Written and read by Mary Teresa. Copyright 2016. The phones were the first to go down. "Network's out," my friend said, and he frowned. His frown deepened into a perplexed scowl. The landline was down. I activated my handheld computer. "Network's down here too," I said. By this time, he'd found the dusty remote control for the television. All that happened on that screen was blue. I had to search for batteries for the portable radio, but I don't think the delay caused the inevitable. No sound came forth. It was lucky my friend was too poor to have a car with GPS. Less than a block away from his house, we were flagged down by a stalled motorist. "My car just stopped," she huffed, "and I can't reach anyone." This included the GPS helpline. She clambered into the back seat. We weren't too sure where to go, though getting a drink as originally planned still seemed apropos. The stranded passenger, though, suggested we visit the police to find out what the fuck was going on. As we passed 2 more stranded vehicles, and 2 more joined our crowded back seat, all clamoring to do the same, we decided to agree. My friend found the way without any computer assistance at all. The police were closed. More accurately, the way in was manned and barricaded. Yesterday, the force consisted of 4 officers and 2 cars, one of which stayed parked in front of the station always. I knew that. Everyone knew that. I was here yesterday. The man at the barricade motioned us along with a sinister gun. I am no expert in munitions, but this weapon was not the friendlier sidearm I saw holstered yesterday. We were not the only car being so motioned by, when another man shouted through a bullhorn that we were to return home. We weren't the only ones to stop our cars, to bark them, and demand in loud and churlish voices, "What is going on?" The bullhorn replied, "Disperse." "Or what?" someone asked from 2 cars away. A single shot answered. Pete fell in a crumpled heap. His blood was so real. The merest moment of silence hung like a shroud over us all. Engine started, tires squealed. Pete's wife could be heard screaming. Then there was another shot, and she screamed no more. The sound of 2 cars colliding drew our attention. The occupants, including a child, were dragged out by the uniforms, and one glared at us. My friend pressed on the gas, and we rounded the curve that much more quickly. The screams came with us, and then we realized it was the woman we first picked up. She was almost incoherent. All I could make out was, "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" My friend tried to reason with her, but these had suddenly become unreasonable times. She opened the rear door while my friend was at full speed to show her determination, and he screeched to a halt. In the moment of silence, between the woman disappearing into the bushes and the one passenger slamming the door shut, we heard shooting, and not so far away. My friend and I looked at each other. I'm not sure what I saw reflected in his eyes. The one passenger in the back gave an intersection for an address. Said, "If you could take me there, I'd appreciate that." The other man gave a similar inexact address, and my friend and I were alone. I tried the radio. He tried his cell phone. Neither worked. He said, "Do you have any cash?" He looked studiously at the road, empty of traffic, with its detritus of dead vehicles. His tone was unfamiliar. "No," I said, and I cursed myself for my earlier suggestion to go for a drink. I cleared my throat and asserted my lie more forcefully. "No." He dropped me at my place without another word, and I watched him as he left. It was the last time I saw him, and I wish there was some significance to that. I tried my computer, but the network was still down. The computer let me know, as computers have done since being equipped with batteries, that its power supply was low. I went to plug it in. It was plugged in. I hastened to turn on the desk lamp. No light emanated. The electric clock was silent. The fridge was dark. The power was out. The power went out frequently. It came via an underwater cable, and I guess during weather it sometimes must come unplugged. I live partly off-grid, and have a wood stove for this reason, and a solar array out back. I had to make the switch manually, but this was a mere inconvenience. I sighed a mighty sigh of relief when the power was restored, and a hot cup of coffee was warming my hands. They were clenched tightly around the mug, and I gazed at them in wonder, for the longer I looked, the harder they shook. When hot coffee splashed to my lap, I struggled to put the cup on the kitchen table. It was a struggle that hardly seemed worth the effort. Once I was free of the cup, I began to shake all over. I could not understand this morning's events, and I said aloud to the empty walls, "I don't understand. The power has gone out before, but we all knew what to do." I poured the coffee into a thermos, spilling only some of it, and set out by way of the deer path out back. I was purposely trying to avoid detection. The street beyond was quiet, in a threatening way. I was sure GPS would not know of this path. Hell, not even my neighbor of 20 years knew it existed, and it was her I was going off to see. Old Mrs. Hubble had no solar array, but an old diesel generator she often forgot to fill. She had never determined how to start it. The last words Joe said to me, 10 years ago and soon before he died, were, "For God's sakes, do not leave Alice alone with that machine." So I went to her now. It took longer than usual. My legs kept giving out. The day was almost gone by the time I emerged from the forest. I should have heard Mrs. Hubble's television, for the woman was hard of hearing. Here, too, the silence threatened. My knock upon her door echoed in the emptiness. I entered uninvited, as I always did, after the obligatory knock, and made my way to the television room. This is what Joe Hubble had called it, and his wife continued the tradition. This is what the room was, filled with television sets going back into the 60s. Mrs. Hubble sat in front of the newest one, remote clenched tightly in her hand. She looked balefully at me, as if it were my fault the damn thing was not working. "When will the power be restored?" she demanded to know. She continued in her usual way, while I poured us some coffee and found the brandy for added fortitude. Snatches of her diatribe came through nonetheless. Damned inconvenient, pay my taxes, and I missed my shows. "I'll go start the generator," I said, ignoring the comments, "and I'll explain when I get back." When I returned, the television was looking blue, and she looked at me expectantly. Before I could say anything, she said, "Computers and phones aren't working either." I nodded my head, found my coffee, and sank down. Mrs. Hubble might have been hard of hearing, but her eyesight was fine. "Something terrible has happened," she said. Her eyes went from my shaking hands to my eyes, which could not quite meet hers. I told what happened at the police station. Her face blanched. She had immigrated from Prague in '68, and this was important for what she said next. "We have no means of communicating with the outside world." This was a statement, not a question. "This isn't Prague," I said, not knowing why, except it had crossed my mind that old Mrs. Hubble had escaped the Iron Curtain in '68, and she was from Prague. Power doesn't care about politics, she said. She rose with difficulty and brushed away my movement to help. It's time to eat, she said, for we will think more clearly on a full stomach. She put the brandy bottle within my reach and told me to stay put. I obeyed as a child would. The bottle was much emptier when she returned with a steaming heap of food. After many mouthfuls, I asked, "Did they tell you martial law?" But didn't know how to finish it. "Of course not, dear. We simply had no phone and no power. At dusk, the first evening, the army used bullhorns to announce a curfew. This isn't Prague," I repeated. Still my ears prickled for the bullhorn. "Of course it isn't, dear. Neither is it 1968. Still we can." She couldn't finish. She dissipated. No weapon had discharged that I could hear, but the mess that was Mrs. Hubble could not have happened without a weapon. The only sound was that which expelled all life and most of her torso away. I had a forkful of food halfway to my mouth. I stared foolishly out the shattered front window pane at what looked like a child's elongated remote plane. It looked back. Perhaps it was out of bullets, for it too simply and suddenly disappeared. Mrs. Hubble's legs stopped twitching. I puked. Then I ran. For a bit there I was running and puking and doing a poor job of both. If it was out of bullets, it might come back. How often had it killed to run out of bullets? Did it know where I lived? At this thought, I turned sharply off the deer trail that no one but I knew about, and stumbled through the tangled underbrush of a temperate rainforest. All manner of science fiction scenarios came, unbidden and unwelcome, to my mind. As I sat in the cold shelter of a seaside cave, it occurred to me such a weapon had ways of finding me that went way beyond fiction. In the distance, I could see the lights of the big island twinkling and inviting me to come. In the moment before dawn, when it is coldest and most bleak, the drone found me.